Hey, it's Steph, and welcome to the Straight Up with Steph podcast, where we have real discussions around health and life and just trying to be better at both. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Straight Up with Steph. There is some drama going on in dentistry right now. I decided to do a last minute podcast recording because of what's going on. So let me tell you, there was a resolution passed from the American Dental Association that would supposedly allow foreign trained dentists and dental students to start performing dental hygiene services without passing a board exam. Supposedly, this is to address the workforce issues, but this is opening up a whole can of worms as far as maintaining the integrity of the care that our patients get and the hygiene profession as a whole. People are very upset about this, and I understand. It's scary and it's frustrating, and I get it. But I wanted to find someone who could answer the questions that I've been getting that I don't even know the answers to. My friend Alyssa Aberle, who's here in Colorado, just like me, she graciously agreed to come on my podcast. I asked her last night. She agreed to come on today so that we can talk about what's going on. She explains what this resolution says, what it means, and what we can do as dental hygienists. Because just because the resolution passed doesn't mean that, like, that's it and dental students can start doing hygiene tomorrow. That's not what it means. There's a lot that we can still do, especially once these issues reach the state level. She walks us through just how all that stuff works and the actions that we can take as hygienists. The workforce issue is a real issue. We've got patients who need care and there's not enough people to get it. So I understand that people are looking for solutions. Alyssa and I also talk about some other long-term solutions like increasing dental hygiene schools and also the compacts that are available that allow people to go state to state and practice hygiene. If you want to learn about what's going on in dentistry right now in regards to this and want to hear from someone who really knows her stuff, definitely check out this episode with Alyssa. Hey, Alyssa, thank you. Oh my gosh, thank you so much for joining such last minute.
Sure, no problem. I know the time is of the essence right now.
Yeah, it's just I opened my Instagram this morning and just the DMs from a post about the foreign dentist thing, like it people want to know what the hell's going on. I want to know what the hell's going on. So I was like, I don't actually know the answers to these questions, but I know someone who does. So anyway, for those listening, I texted Alyssa last night asking her if she could be on the podcast today so that we could talk about this. But Alyssa, I'm just going to get right into it. Could you explain what this initiative is as far as allowing foreign dentists to supposedly become a hygienist here without taking an exam?
Sure. So the ADA, the American Dental Association, has their House of Delegates every year, as does the American Dental Hygienists Association, the American Periodontics Association, like all these other associations have these business meetings. And at these meetings, they vote on policies for their organization itself. So it's things that they are going to prioritize in advocacy and legislation, things they're going to work towards, things that they're going to push for. And so this happens every year. This year, in particular, obviously, a lot of the conversation was around workforce and potential workforce shortages, how we're going to address workforce issues in dentistry. And there were a lot of proposals that were brought to the table. Some were passed, some were not passed, some were sent to committees for further investigation, as happens every year. So a few of them have become pretty hot topics. And one of them that you're mentioning is allowing internationally trained dentists to come to the United States and practice as dental hygienists. It was left fairly vague, but there was conversation about that happening without a board exam and without graduating from any U.S. CODA accredited educational program. So again, the goal is supposedly workforce development. And so they're trying to figure out how can we utilize people who might already be in the United States, wanting to work in dentistry, wanting to contribute to the workforce. How can we expedite that process for people? And one of these proposals is allowing these internationally trained dentists to come practice here as hygienists, not as dentists.
I understand them trying to find a solution to the workforce shortage for sure. What I don't understand is especially the lack of any kind of exam to show competency. I don't see the logic with that?
Yeah, so that's kind of the problem that a lot of hygienists, educators, other people in the dental profession are bringing up as well is there's a reason we've had the educational and licensure standards that we've had in the United States for hygienists, for dentists, for dental assistants, for all the people in our profession. And the problem that has always presented with internationally trained dentists specifically is that the educational standards from country to country vary greatly. So, what somebody from one country may be prepared and educated to do from another country, the educational standards could be completely different. So, that's why there has had to be an alternative pathway for internationally trained dentists to become dentists in the United States. Usually, that's through an international student program that's part of a dental program, dental school. It's an abbreviated program where they make sure that there's certain things that are covered and they're at certain competencies. Same thing applies for hygiene. Some of those international dental programs are prevention based and some are not. So some of those dentists, it's, sometimes 1 or 2 years out of a high school level education. Sometimes it's more of a doctorate level program. Sometimes it's focused on surgery and restorative. Sometimes it does include preventative and hygiene, but that varies really widely from country to country. So the hard part is always, how do we ensure that that's an equivalent level of program? And one of those ways would be to pass the same board exams, because if somebody could pass the written or clinical board exam, you can assume that there's some basic level of competency. Not requiring that leaves a lot to be unknown. And so this program or a similar type of program is already in existence in Florida. They are the only state where internationally trained dentists currently can get licensed as hygienists. And there is that really wide range of experience and understanding. And I know personally quite a few internationally trained dentists who have gone to hygiene school once moving to the United States. And oftentimes they say, I didn't know what I didn't know about hygiene. You guys do it completely different than how we were taught in, my other country that I lived in and was trained in. So again, you're not sure that that same level of competency and education is present. And so until we have some kind of way to equalize and show that competency, it's really hard to say that it's the same.
It's just it's scary, and what you just said, that some foreign trained dentists are like, "Oh my God, like they're this isn't how I was trained," or whatever. I have heard that comment over and over and over, excuse me, in my DMs. People are like, a foreign trained dentist came to, I don't know, work at the office or whatever, and they didn't have the same level of education as the hygienist or the dentist.
And my thing is always, anyone can learn dental hygiene, right? Anyone
Mhm.
can learn dentistry. Anyone is capable of that. But with that same level of education and competency, and I think that's where we need to kind of focus is, I'm not saying that internationally trained dentists are a harm to society in and of themselves, but we just need to make sure that that education and licensure standard is the same, and that we're not lowering that, because again, it's our patients who are going to suffer at the end of the day, and they don't know always what kind of education or licensure we have had. So they're entrusting their care to our office, and just trusting that the people providing them care are doing so in a competent and safe way. And so we owe it to them to make sure that that standard stays the same. And so there could be people who come and can pass those board exams and are amazing hygienists, and I'm not saying they're not, but we should put those things in place to make sure that they can do that at that standard.
Yeah, and you're right. At the end of the day, it is about the patients and protecting their health and the integrity of the care that they're receiving. So, since this resolution has passed, is that it, or is there still things that we can do as hygienists?
That's a really good question, because I saw in one Facebook group this morning, they were like, so can my assistant that was a foreign trained dentist just start doing scaling today. And it's like, no, no, no. So the ADA House of Delegates passed these resolutions. And again, that just sets their legislative priorities and the direction that that association would like to see things move. However, licensure is handled at a state level. So every state already has laws and rules and licensure procedures that are in place. And that does not change just because the ADA resolution passed. What that does mean, though, is that the ADA and their state associations and their local components are probably going to start putting effort, lobbying money, dollars, time into changing these things at the state level. So that nothing has gone into effect today. It is still not allowed other than in Florida as of today. And so there's still a lot that's going to have to happen for us here in Colorado. Steph and I are both in Colorado. Our state practice act says that a hygienist has to graduate from a CODA accredited program, pass a written board exam, and pass a clinical board exam. And so in order for that to change, it would have to go through legislation. There would have to be a bill introduced, bill sponsors, stakeholders, committees, all these things that go along with legislation. Our legislative session only occurs in our state from January to May each year. So right now it's November. That couldn't happen even if it wanted to today. So these things are going to take time. And so there's still a lot of conversation that's going to happen. I know ADHA is trying to work with ADA on how to implement some of these things and maybe find some solutions. State hygiene associations and dental associations hopefully are starting those conversations as well, because a lot of this stuff is going to come back to the state level. And so there's going to be a lot of opportunity for people to get involved, have their voices heard, hopefully engage our patients in the conversation, because it's ultimately them that is going to be affected. So there's a lot more that's going to have to happen before these laws change across the country.
I've had people ask me, and I don't know the answer to this, what they can do now. Do I need to send a letter to someone? Like what, what can I do right now? Do we have to wait until it gets to the state for us to really start taking action?
So I always recommend, first and foremost, is be a member of your professional association, whether that's the American Dental Hygienists Association, the Dental Assisting Association, whatever your profession is, because again, they're probably already working on these things. So be a member, reach out to them at the state level and say, hey, what is going on? What is the process? Each state does operate a little differently. So in some states, it may just be the dental board that has to go through rulemaking. In some states, it's going to have to be legislation. So a lot of times people are like, I want to write a petition or I want to write a letter, and it makes you feel like you accomplished something. But knowing who is actually going to be the person in charge of changing that law or that rule is really important, because you can write a letter to your governor all day, but if it's the legislature that's going to have to pass something, or the dental board, it may not do anything. So I think reaching out to your state association and seeing what's going on currently, how can you help? Are there petitions? Are there letters? Sometimes there's also strategy involved with legislation. All the time there's strategy involved. So sometimes it may be that there are going to be letter writing campaigns, but the timing is strategic. And so again, reaching out to those organizations that can get more voices at the table. There's power in numbers with everything, and just making sure that you're doing things that are actually going to be helpful, not just doing things, like you said, on Facebook or into the universe that makes you feel like you accomplished something, but no change actually happened. So
Why is it so? I'm just playing devil's advocate for a second.
yeah.
Why is it so important to be a member of your national and state organization?
So for any profession, those are the people who are working on this stuff on a day-to-day basis. These are the associations that in many cases have been around for hundreds of years. ADHA has been around for over 100 years, and they are the advocacy voice for dental hygienists. They have the most members of dental hygienists, and they speak on behalf of our whole profession. They also have people from different backgrounds in different states. And so they're very well informed on what's happening around the country. And again, that strategy piece that can come into play. And ultimately, I mean, there is power in numbers. So when we
Mhm.
go to the legislature in a state, or when ADHA is working on something at the federal level, one of the questions that we get asked often is, how many members do you have? And if you say, we have 50 members, and they're like, okay, well, that's 1% of the dental hygienists, that doesn't sound the same as saying we have 75% of the dental hygienists who are members, because now you're speaking for 75% of the dental hygienists and you have a lot more power. There's also dollars that go with membership. So money is how the world works. It's how we pay for lobbyists. It's how we pay for public campaigns. It's how we pay for resources and support for state and national advocacy. And so that's the other reason, even if you can't get involved, even if you don't like politics and don't want to get involved, your dollars help progress those initiatives and that advocacy work. So even just paying the dues makes a huge difference.
Do you think with the hygiene shortage that we're going to just keep seeing more and more of these things pop up? Because I feel like within this last year, I've seen more than I ever have.
Yeah, so I talk about this often, but I used to work for our an operations director who was a military member, and his big thing was always like, don't come to the table with problems, come with solutions. And so I think all of these initiatives are people trying to find solutions. Like, we are all feeling workforce shortages. Side note that that's not just in dentistry. Like, every profession is feeling it, especially in healthcare. Um, and so until we start really focusing on how can we solve these problems, we're just going to keep banging against each other. And so my whole focus is always, how can we all get on the same page? What are the things that we actually agree on? What are the things that need to really be addressed as the root cause? And how can we find solutions to those? Because you can say that it's that hygienists are asking for too much money, but that's layered because it's inflation, it's housing costs, it's the price of living in a metro area, it's career ladder opportunities. There's so many layers to that, that it's not just that hygienists are asking for too much money. But what's really underneath that is that supply costs are going up, and people are moving out of metro areas because they can work from home, and insurance reimbursements are decreasing, not even staying the same. So there's so many underlying issues. And if we could all stop fighting with each other and sit down and be like, these are actual solutions that benefit our workforce, they benefit our dental teams, but they also benefit our patients in the long run. And how can we all get on the same page? Until then, we're going to see people trying to create solutions, albeit not great solutions, but they're trying to come up with some type of solution. The other problem is that people want a fast solution. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, especially with stuff like workforce, nothing is happening overnight. You know, you can add more dental hygiene programs. That doesn't happen overnight. You can advocate for state laws to change on licensure. That's going to be a few years before that gets into place and is actually affecting our workforce as well. You can come up with all these solutions, but it's like we have to start looking further ahead instead of just what's happening right now. How does it feel right now? And think, where does this industry need us to be in 10 years? Where do we need to be in 15 years? And what are the things we can start working on now that will get us there, even if it's not as fast as we want to see that change happen?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. We're in a crisis right now, and so
Mhm.
people are, like, they're scrambling, and, when I see, like, this initiative, or I see initiatives about, assistants being able to scale or probe or whatever, and it's just like, I'm not necessarily seeing that as the dentists are just wanting to pay the lowest amount possible to get the job done type thing, and they hate hygienists or whatever. I don't believe any of that. But they have patients
Mhm.
that they need to serve. they can't do all of the hygiene and the restorative, and they're just trying to find a solution. And it's so like I get it at a certain point, but also I don't want to just lower the integrity of the care that our patients are getting.
The problem is we also have a shortage of dental assistants.
Yeah.
We also, according to the American Dental Association, have a shortage, and the shortage is going to get worse for dentists. We have Facebook groups where dentists are trying to talk undergrad students out of pursuing careers in dentistry because it's not what they thought it was going to be. So there's so many like systemic things happening, and it's not just one person's fault. Like we have to address some of these things as a whole because yeah, there's people who need care and we have to figure out a way that we can get that care to them, and it's going to take a lot, and I think we're all going to have to kind of compromise and come to some joint solutions because if we're just against each other, it's not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, and that's what's frustrating me. I try to stay out of the Facebook groups, honestly. But I've been on there a bit more than normal lately, and just the finger pointing and the name calling and throwing people under the bus. It's like I understand people are frustrated and they're scared, but that's not gonna help,
Yeah,
you know.
it's
Yeah.
hard because people are passionate, and like you
Yeah.
said, like you're in a crisis, and so that stress response goes into play. And instead of just taking a step back and being like, we're all people, we're all supposedly working towards the same goal, which is getting care to our patients. We're not actually as far apart as people want us to think we are. So
Yeah. Yeah. Right. It's just that we get kind of bogged down in like situations like this. So as far as other solutions, what comes to my mind is like more schools and then allowing hygienists to practice really at the top of their scope, like mobile dentistry or going into other places like non-traditional clinical
yeah.
roles. As far as schools, do you know, are there more schools being like started?
Yeah, so I actually pulled some statistics because the Commission on Dental Accreditation provided testimony to the ADA House of Delegates regarding these resolutions, because there was the one about internationally trained dentists. There's also one about uh, dental students being able to practice as dental hygienists. And then there was one around faculty to student ratios in dental hygiene programs. So again, all trying to address how do we get more hygienists into the workforce. And the Commission on Dental Accreditation said since 2020, they have increased enrollment of 88 dental hygiene programs, sorry. So dental hygiene programs had to submit to CODA if they want to increase their class sizes. So they want to go from 24 to 40 or 40 to 60 or whatever the case may be. And they have done 88 enrollment increases in the last 4 years, and they've approved 22 new dental hygiene programs in the country since 2020, so that the program enrollment increases an additional 800 dental hygienists graduating per year, and the 22 new dental hygiene programs is 422 new dental hygiene graduates per year. So that's 1,200 plus new hygienists per year. And then for dental assisting, same thing. They've had 21 program enrollment increases, which was 255 new dental assisting graduates per year, and then 8 new dental assisting programs, which was 130 new graduates per year. So CODA is working hard. Like
Yeah.
they are working feverishly. They are getting a lot of program requests, which is great. For us in Colorado, we had 4 dental hygiene programs until July. We just had a 5th one that started in July, and we have 4 more that are currently going through accreditation here in Colorado. So we could go from 4 programs to 9 programs in a matter of 2 years. But again, those take a while to go through the accreditation process, and there's a reason we required this accreditation process, to ensure that those educational standards are in place and to ensure that people who are graduating have some level of competency when they graduate. And so if it's taking this much work to create new programs, it seems like undermining those by allowing people to come in without that education seems counterproductive. But I
And what
do think we're going to see that movement across the country. But then the other problem that goes with that is all the dental programs, hygiene programs, assisting programs also struggle to find faculty. And so higher education salaries are much lower than clinical salaries. And so, and they're hard jobs. You know, you usually have to have a bachelor's degree, if not a master's degree, depending on which programs you're working in. You have to have certain levels of experience and background. So we also have to do something to build up our potential future faculty. Otherwise, we can't open all these new programs and educate these new students.
What are some solutions for that? It's just like we solve one
Yeah,
problem
I
and then
know.
like create 10 more
Exactly.
issues, you know?
It's like this web of things that's happening.
Yeah.
So the one solution that was proposed by the ADA House of Delegates was to either lower or remove the ratio requirements. So currently for dental hygiene programs, they are allowed to have 5 students per 1 faculty member. And so that, you know, keeps that ratio low, allows those students to have that one-on-one instruction. One of the solutions is to change that ratio, so allow more students per faculty member, or remove the ratio altogether so that schools have their own say in how they want to staff their programs. The problem is if you talk to any faculty member in a dental hygiene program, they already say it's hard to manage 5 students in clinics. You have 5 students seeing patients all at the same time, meeting competencies checked off, and the more students you have, the less time you have with each student. So then those students potentially would graduate with less competency, less one-on-one instruction time, less prepared to enter into the workforce, which then puts the burden back on employers and dental offices and the dental hygiene graduates themselves to pursue additional training and education, which is not the point of the educational system. So again, that's complicated. I think another thing that can happen, but this is going to be a state by state thing too, is just adjusting higher education funding to get salaries where they need to be so that those careers are appealing to people, especially people who have already pursued master's degrees and doctorate degrees, and making them want to be in those positions as educators.
Let's say it's a bachelor program, like the faculty has to have one step above that, right? As far as degrees, so they need a master's. I'm just afraid of the faculty getting burnt out
Yes.
if they have to, if they reduce those
Mm-hmm.
ratios. So I'm like, could they just hire assistants or, you know, helpers or something
Mm-hmm.
to that don't necessarily have to have that higher level, but that can still help with the workload?
And
Does that make
that
sense?
used to be the case, yeah. So adjunct clinical faculty in the past was able to have an associate's degree in dental hygiene. But then the full-time faculty that was teaching didactic courses had to have that bachelor's level or master's level or doctorate level, you know, depending on the program. But a few years ago, CODA changed that. And now all faculty, whether they're adjunct clinical faculty or full-time faculty, has to have the minimum of a bachelor's degree. And the
Mm.
problem is that a lot of those bachelor degrees programs, like the one I went to at CU, have closed. And so we don't have programs like we once did to educate bachelor's level dental hygienists. So again, who's going to educate them at a bachelor's level so that they can go back and teach? And I know that that has been a struggle. One of the new programs opening here in Colorado has looked at what that might look like for them to do tuition reimbursement or some kind of loan repayment where if those hygienists wanted to serve as faculty, they could go back and get their bachelor's and then the program would pay it off through them working for them for so many years. So, I mean, there's opportunities like that, but I know that that has been a struggle for programs as well.
God, yeah, it's like so complicated.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
I
what I
had it,
always tell people. I'm like, it looks like it's so easy. Like it's
yeah,
really easy for us to reduce it to hygienists are asking for too much money. But that's so not the whole
no.
picture. There's so many layers to it and there's so many factors that come into play. And again, if you're not involved with this stuff on a day-to-day basis, if this isn't the stuff you're talking about in your clinical job, which it's probably not, it's hard to see the whole picture. And so again, leaning back on those state associations and those people who are involved in some of the legislation and have seen these changes that have happened over time, they're going to have a better picture of all the pieces that are at play and things that have already been discussed and things that could happen and what it would take to make them happen. And so, yeah, not try to reinvent the wheel, but lean on the people who may know more about how this is happening.
Yeah, just making sure that you are a member, making sure you're signed up for emails, right, with your
Mhm.
state association, following them on social media, just to make sure that you're being updated. I had a comment, a good comment on Instagram, actually. She's a hygienist of 16
Mhm.
years. She's like, I have to retake my boards to move to a different state. And now, some people can come in and just start practicing hygiene
Yeah.
without passing a board. But anyways, that made me think about the compact. And
Mhm.
I also had another comment that there's two compacts out
Yes.
there, and one is better than the other. So can you talk about the
Sure.
compacts and what those are?
Um, yeah. So the interstate compact, when we talk about it, I actually had to explain this to my husband last night because he's like, "What is a compact? You keep talking about this thing, and I don't know what you're talking about." He's like, "It sounds like all the people put their hands in and they're like, go team." And I'm like, "Yeah, kind of." So a compact is an agreement from multiple states coming to an agreement, kind of like a contract between states. So some compacts that we are more familiar with are things like driver's licenses. So a driver's license is a compact between states that you can have a Colorado driver's license and you can go to Utah or Wyoming or Kansas, and you don't have to get a new driver's license when you enter that state. You still have to follow that state's driving laws and speed limits and things like that, but your Colorado license will still allow you to drive in that state. So it's similar with these occupational compacts. And the idea behind them is that you will have your originating state dental license, dental hygiene license, and you would be able to get privileges in other states in order to practice in those states. But they have to be other states that are part of the compact. So each state has the ability to decide if they want to participate or not. And then you could go to any of those participating states, assuming your originating state was a participating state, get privileges there and practice there. You'd still have to follow their practice act. So in Colorado, we can do a lot of things that other states don't allow. So if I went to Texas, I can't be doing block anesthesia. I can't be doing restorative. I can't own my own practice. I still have to follow their state laws. But the compact has a database of people's board scores, transcripts, things like that. So instead of having to submit all of that in a new state, retake a bunch of exams, the database would say, yes, this person has checked all these boxes. Therefore, we can give them privileges. For the physical therapists compact, they said you can get privileges in another state in as little as 9 minutes. So instead of waiting 6 months or
Yeah.
however long it takes, that system has all that information and they can approve your license in that state or those privileges really quickly and allow for more portability between states. So there are two compacts currently that exist. The first one was created by the Council on State Governments. It was a project with ADA, ADHA, and the Department of Defense. There were a lot of other stakeholders that were at the table, from dental boards and dental schools and a lot of the different stakeholders, and they came up with this compact. The nice thing about the Council on State Governments compact is that there are other professional occupational compacts that they have created. So they've done massage therapists, physical therapists, physician assistants, EMTs, occupational therapists. There's a bunch of other professions that they have also done compacts for, and the language is pretty consistent. So for us here in Colorado, we just went through this legislation this past year. And at the same time as us, I think it was the PA compact was going through at the same time as us. And the legislators liked it because they were like, we're familiar with these compacts. We've already passed a bunch of them. It makes sense for you guys all to have a similar type of portability. So it was kind of an easy plug and play because they were familiar with those compacts. The other compact that came about after the CSG compact was from the American Academy of Dental Boards, the AADB. They are a group of dental boards and regulatory agencies that created a second compact, also, again, focused on that portability, but they have a few different specifications. But yeah, now it's become a compact one or compact two. One's better than the other. I think the concerns with the compact that people like to talk about a lot are that they are afraid that it will lower our educational standards. So they want to make sure that in order to participate in a compact, you have to have graduated from a CODA accredited program, have taken a written board exam, and have taken a clinical exam. There's a trend here, right? And so we don't want to diminish our current standards of education and licensure. And I don't think either organization wants to see that diminishing. It's just the language that's used and how they use it and how they feel it could get interpreted in the future. So currently, Colorado, we joined the CSG compact. I believe there's 11 states right now that are part of that compact. They needed 7 states in order for it to be operationalized. So it should be up and running probably in the next year. They're working on getting that database and infrastructure built, and then it will be operationalized. And the AADB compact, because it came afterwards, is having a little bit slower start because some of these states had already started with the CSG compact. So we could see 2 compacts where, half the states are in one and half are in another. That would kind of defeat the point. So I would hope that it doesn't end up that way. But like even in nursing, people talk about the nursing license portability a lot. The nursing, the NCLEX, which is their like board exam, I think there's like 37 something participating states. It could have changed, so don't quote me on that. But again, it's not all 50 states. So it does open up that portability, but that doesn't mean you can move anywhere. It doesn't mean that you just get to move anywhere tomorrow and start practicing there. There's still a process and you still have to obtain those privileges. But I sure hope we're moving towards more portability because I know that's been a really hard thing. And again, when we need workforce and we need to have that mobility of our workforce, the less barriers we can put in people's way, the better. But again, maintaining that education and licensure standard.
Can a state, and sorry if I missed this, but can a state like Colorado, so we're in the CSG compact, could we also be in the other one, or it has to be one or the other?
My understanding is that it has to be one or the other.
Okay.
Because like we had to pass a bill that said that we were going to join this compact. So we would also have to pass a bill that said we were going to join this other compact. And to my understanding from talking to our lobbyists, and one of our lobbyists for the Colorado Dental Hygienists Association is an attorney by trade, she says that creates some legal contradiction. And so you would have some issues where you can't have one part of statute say a different thing than another part of statute because they clean that all up during the legislative process. So my understanding is that we would have to, if we decided to go to the other compact, we'd have to pass legislation to remove this language from statute, then go through another legislative process to add other language back in. So
Which would be
not an
years.
easy process. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So we have 11, you said there's 11 states in the CSG compact, but it's not operational or whatever now. Like how long does it take for that to actually, where people can actually use it?
So they released the final compact language in the spring of 2022. And so again, like our state, our legislative session only runs January to May. So we had already missed the window by February, March to get it into that legislative session. So we brought it up in 2023. And that was a lot of states' situation was that, timing didn't work out or they had to wait till that next legislative session. I know Nevada only does legislation every other year. So some states have to wait a while. So They needed 7 states to join the compact in order to start the process of building out that database. And they are now at 11. So they had their first meeting in August, that the commission that's going to be overseeing that compact. And they said the timeline was about 12 to 18 months, depending on how long that takes. Because they now have to work with all those 11 dental boards, plus anyone who joins after that. And I do think, since it is still pretty new, I think we'll continue to see more states join. And but hopefully they're hoping, by the end of 2025, we'll actually see that up and running.
Okay. Well, I mean, we're getting there, it's
That's
just
what, like
slow.
I said, that's the problem. It's like nothing happens overnight,
Yeah.
and legislation especially takes a while. And so it's finding people and organizations who are thinking longer term, like, not what needs to happen today, but what needs to happen down the road, and how do we start putting things in place to get there.
Well, thank you so much for coming on last minute. And you literally know everything. Like, if I have a question, I'm always like, I'm just going to ask Alyssa.
I,
Uh,
but that's the funny thing, is I say the same thing about you. I tag you in a bunch of stuff too. And what we were texting about, I was like, we all have something that we're an expert in.
yeah,
We can't know everything about everything. And so I just am glad I have people in my life that are experts in the things I'm not, and we can
me
all
too.
help each other. So
Well, and you explain everything in just a very logical, like non-emotional, just neutral, easy to understand way, which I appreciate.
yeah.
So if you could maybe just give people one last piece of advice on if they're feeling very emotional about this or wanting to, I don't know, write letters or whatever, what is your advice for them?
Again, I mean, reach out to your state association and the people who have been probably working on some of these things. We always love to have more people involved. And a lot of times we don't get a lot of people who want to be involved because we're all busy. And so it's always nice to get people who are passionate about something and have them help. So I would start there, get coffee with some people, and start, building those relationships. Reach out to people on your dental team. So I think a big part of this is going to be us building relationships with each other.
Hmm.
Talk to your dentist about this that you work with. Talk to the dental assistants, and you'll start to realize, again, we're not as far apart as we think we are, and it's really easy. I mean, we just had the election last week. It's really
Yeah.
easy to feel like it's an us versus them on anything, and they want this and they want this. And it's like, who are you talking about? Who is they? Because
Yeah.
if you talk to your neighbor, if you talk to the people you work with, you'll find out that you actually have a lot in common. So start like building those relationships and seeing how you can start changing things. I think on a micro level, we have some workplace issues that are happening in our industry where people don't feel appreciated, not just hygienists, dentists, dental
Hmm.
assistants, administrative team members, whomever. We have, lack of benefits. We have people who aren't able to practice to the top of their scope, like you mentioned. So start talking as a team and on a like micro scale of how can we lift each other up? How can we encourage each other? How can we grow together? Because again, we're going to break down a lot of those barriers and stop listening to the hype. And then, yeah, just dig in and get involved if you have a lot to say. We're always happy to help you be on our team. So reach out
Yeah,
to your association. They would love to have you.
that's great advice. And I have heard from multiple dentists as well, on Instagram, and they're like, we don't like, what can we do? We don't want this, So it's not like, it's definitely not us versus them. If anyone wants to reach out to you or contact you or learn more about you, what's the best place for that?
I mean, I'm on Instagram. My Instagram is Alyssa RDH, and I know Steph will tag that as well.
Hmm.
I do still work with the Dental Hygiene Association here in Colorado. I just stepped down as executive director a couple weeks ago. So I do have an email through the Hygiene Association, but it's a little tricky. It's just reg_practice@codha.org. Or if you go to my Instagram, you can find my, email and contact information there too. But yeah, that's usually the easiest.
Okay. Yeah. And I'll put all that information down in the show notes so people can just click it and start hounding you. No, just kidding. Anyways, thank you very much, Alyssa, for your time and just all of your wisdom with all of this. And thank you, everyone, for listening. We'll see you next time.